everyone. I'm Clara Wallace, and I'm the Assistant Director of Talks here at 6th and I. Whether you're here with us in person or watching virtually from home, welcome and thank you for being with us tonight. For anyone who's here for the first time, 6th and I is a nonprofit center for arts, entertainment, ideas, and Jewish life. And by attending our programs, you help fuel our mission to inspire more meaningful and fulfilling lives. We're thrilled to have actor, writer, producer, and comedian Ed Helms with us tonight. From his time as a correspondent on The Daily Show to playing quirky paper salesman Andy Bernard on The Office and Stu Price in the Hangover trilogy, Ed Helms has entertained and delighted fans across TV and film. And now we get to have him in our ear as the host of SNAFU, an award-winning podcast about history's greatest screw-ups. History contains a plethora of major screw-ups, otherwise known as SNAFUs. It's a term that was coined during World War I, and I'll let Ed tell you what it actually stands for. But essentially, things are pretty screwed up, but aren't they always? SNAFU the book builds on the podcast and takes you on a wild ride through time that covers the hilarious, head-scratching, and occasionally inspiring blunders that have shaped our world from the 1950s to the 2000s. As Ed dives into each decade's finest faceplants, he unpacks the decision-making and aftermath of America's biggest mishaps. The stories offer fresh insights that just might prevent history from repeating itself again and again. Ed Helms will be in conversation tonight with David Chalian, an Emmy award-winning journalist and the Senior Vice President, Washington Bureau Chief, and Political Director for CNN. In his role, David supervises CNN's daily political reporting across all platforms, the polling and decision desk operations, and the editorial content for special political programming. We're grateful he could be with us at a time when there never seems to be a slow news day. Thank you all again for joining us. Please help me give Ed Helms and David Chalian a warm welcome to 6th and I.
All right.
Hey, everyone.
Woohoo! Oh, this is cool. This is so cool.
Very cool.
Wait, how long has this place been here? Oh, yeah. Okay.
So thank you all for being here. Ed, this is a total thrill for me. But I want to start, if we could, before we get into the book. Actor, comedian, musician, podcaster, and now you're adding author and historian to your vast array of titles. So can you just bring us into the spark of this idea? Like, what generated this notion, first for your podcast and then into this book of incredible vignettes of, like, American history gone awry?
Sure, absolutely. First, I just want to say I had a couple of interviews at CNN today, where David is the bureau chief, and it was a very busy day. There was breaking news, and I just want to say a huge thank you for being here tonight and doing this with me. Also, I'm like instantly thrown. That was not one of my approved questions. So no. So the spark of the idea, well, it actually, so the book is a offshoot of the podcast. Does anyone know the SNAFU podcast? Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. All right. Well, so a few years ago, podcasts like exploded on the scene, more than a few years ago. It seemed like everyone I knew was doing a podcast, and there were all these chat shows, and so many of them were amazing. And I went on a million of them, and I started to wonder, do I fit into this landscape somewhere? Or maybe I'm a podcaster. What does that look like? And I didn't want to do one of those shows, just two people sitting there talking like this.
Great.
and it just felt like a saturated market. So I thought, like, well, what could it be? You know what? And I've always loved kind of digging into old information, like just history. History to me is not about like timelines, and it's storytelling. It's like, and it's also about chasing context for things. You hear about some crazy event from 300 years ago. Well, what was going on around it? Like, why did people act that way or think that way? And I've always just had a deep curiosity about all that. So then it was like, okay, well, maybe I can do a history podcast. Okay, but I want it to be funny. What's going to make it funny? Fuck ups. Like we'll do it about. Can I say that in a religious place?
You can.
I'll be smoked if I. So yeah, it just seemed like the subject matter matched my curiosity and my interest, and also was a good kind of vehicle for comedy. I dove into the podcast. We built an amazing team that does incredible work, and I'm insanely proud of the podcast. We get in a season or two, and it's just like we have so much information. It turns out people have been stepping in it for a real long time, and so a book was just a natural next step.
How do you, are you sitting in a room with your team and everybody's just pitching constant ideas, let's say for the podcast? So you've had 3 seasons, right? You did sort of Cold War season 1, look at FBI corruption in season 2, and I just finished listening to season 3 on Prohibition. And as you noted in the podcast, it's like, what's so great about it, I think, is like, I know about all 3 of those things to some degree, and yet I had no idea these tales that you were going to tell. And like, you learn a piece of history that you think you know, and you get to learn it through a whole new lens in your podcast, which is great. But how do you narrow down your targets of opportunity? As you said, government's been screwing up things forever. So like, what is the process like to select a topic?
We do have frequent meetings. They're Zooms.
Yeah.
We don't sit around in a room, unfortunately. But I think kind of what you're getting at is the sort of curatorial voice of both the podcast and the book. And it emerged very early that the most fun and the most kind of, I think, exciting and the things that would pull in listeners would be things that they may not know already. A lot's been written about the Donner Party or the Titanic or what, but if there's things that people don't know, or they have a vague notion that they know, or like in season 3 about Prohibition, everyone knows about Prohibition, but you probably don't know this aspect of Prohibition. And so that was very much early on, like, yeah, let's do stuff that's not really still in the popular memory.
By this aspect, if you haven't heard it, he means the government actually poisoning its citizens, right? Yeah.
So the quick synopsis of season 3, everyone knows the government didn't want people to drink, so they thought, if we start poisoning the alcohol, that'll be just a fabulous deterrent, and because deterrence is such a great thing to legislate, and thousands of people died because of government poisoning.
Yeah, it's worth a listen, folks. So you grew up in the Atlanta area. Mm-hmm. You go to Oberlin for college. Mm-hmm. You go to New York and pursue a career in improv and stand-up and acting. So where does the history bug come from in you?
It predates all of that. I grew up in a house that I'm very grateful was really valued curiosity and knowledge, and my dad had a huge collection of books. He was a bit of a Civil War guy, and so we had all these great old tomes, musty history tomes. But probably the thing that really captured me early as a kid was we had a book nook in our sort of upstairs hallway, and there were 2 or 3 shelves dedicated entirely to National Geographics. And I would just pull those off and pore through those and just be fascinated by the world. There was probably a good 5 years that I was sure I would be Indiana Jones or some version of Indiana Jones, but just because of National Geographic. But then we also had the World Book encyclopedias. Anybody?
Yes.
Does anybody still have those? A couple of people. Okay, they're probably in your storage locker somewhere. But I loved the World Books. I could just like pull them off the shelves and sit there on a rainy Saturday afternoon and be so happy for hours. So that's kind of, I think, where it started.
I know we're here to talk about you and not me, but I'll just tell you my World Book Encyclopedia story.
Okay, please.
Which is that if you were to go and look, which I think my mom probably still has in an attic somewhere, the P Encyclopedia of World Book, the pages must be so worn around presidents because I used to go and memorize all the U.S. presidents' names in reverse chronological order by like looking in the P World Book. So there you go. I'm a big fan of World Book encyclopedias as well.
Very cool.
You alluded to it when you used that naughty word here in this religious institution, but I'm guessing most people here are familiar with the term, but I don't want anyone to be left behind in the conversation. So what is a SNAFU?
SNAFU, during World War II, soldiers coined this acronym that stands for Situation Normal, All Fucked Up. And it basically just means like, here we go again. Everything's still a mess. And it's come to mean now in sort of modern parlance just like a disaster or a terrible situation, or a pickle, let's say.
A pickle.
Yeah, a terrible pickle.
And do you, again, because it grew out of the podcast, I realized that, as you said, the podcast is deep dive into sort of one thing, but this is like a bunch of vignettes you could pick up and read and put down. It's not necessarily, you broke it up sort of by decades.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is my sales pitch, okay? So the podcast, it's 8 episodes per season, takes you hours to listen to. It's such a fun, delightful, you can pick it up, turn to any page, and just, there's a SNAFU, and each one's like 5, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10 pages, and it's perfect for the beach, it's perfect for your nightstand. I'll say it, it's perfect for your bathroom.
There you go.
Each SNAFU in here is equivalent to 9 grams of fiber. I promise.
Do you have a running list of historical events that you just were like looking to explore? Like, how did you fill this up? Like, what was your process to find all of these abnormalities in American history?
It's so easy. Truly, it's so easy. Once you kind of have like an organizing principle, which in this case was like I was definitely drawn to kind of institutional fuck-ups, like things that involved or were the result of deep hubris or institutional thinking or kind of closed bubble thinking. Those are the ones that really make you feel superior, which is the real fringe benefit of studying SNAFUs. It really makes you feel smart and good about your own terrible decisions, because none of them are as bad as stuff in here.
Given your background and your profession, do you look for the comedic factor in these stories?
Great.
Yes,
that's a great point. The other quality that a SNAFU kind of has to have is either it's inherently hilarious or there's been enough time that it has become hilarious. Tragedy plus time equals comedy. That's a thing I made up, and so it perfectly applies here.
So let's dive into some of these yarns you spin in the book, if you don't mind. Can you? You've got an interesting story about Jimmy Carter entering a nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
What was he doing, and did he suffer any fallout from that?
Okay, I'm so glad you brought this one up. It's one of my favorites in the book, and it's actually the cool thing about this story is that it's actually a hero story, but it's it's the SNAFU. The response to the SNAFU is what creates the hero. So it's the 1950s. There's a nuclear reactor in Ontario, right on the Ottawa River, in Deep River, Ontario. This is very early in the nuclear age, and through a very Homer Simpson-esque series of accidents, a meltdown starts. And it's the first nuclear meltdown in human history. This hadn't happened yet. There's only a handful of nuclear reactors in the world. They start panicking. They call the US government. They're like, we need somebody to help us fix this. Do you have anybody? And the US military is like, well, there's this kid working on nuclear subs, and he's incredibly smart and good at all this stuff. He's a great leader. We're going to send him up there. And that was a 25-year-old Jimmy Carter. And he goes up to this nuclear reactor. It's in the process of melting down. It's so radioactive. They have to dismantle it to stop the meltdown. It's so radioactive that they can only be exposed to it for 90 seconds. So how do you do this? Well, they built a replica of the reactor on a nearby tennis court. They rehearsed over and over again how to dismantle this thing. And then they start the deconstruction. They run in like a NASCAR pit crew, yeah. Right? Like bzz, bzz, just running in, and each person 90 seconds at a time. And while they're dismantling it, they come back out and they do the same thing on the replica that they've built, so they can keep track of the progress. And all of this is like Jimmy Carter. He's the one running all this. He's one of the last people in. He gets in there, takes the last few bolts off or whatever, and they stop. They prevent a full meltdown from happening, and it's really a miraculous and incredible story of courage. And at the time, they didn't fully understand the effects of radiation on the human body, but they knew that it was bad, and they were really worried about Jimmy Carter. They thought maybe he wouldn't be able to have children. Turns out he had 4 very healthy children who thrived, and yet his pee was radioactive for 3 months afterwards.
I mean, I know a lot of Jimmy Carter stories in my life. I did not know that story.
Yeah, isn't that cool? Yeah. And the other thing I love about that is I grew up in Georgia, and my dad was a staunch kind of Georgia Democrat. We were like a Jimmy Carter family, and it pains me that his reputation now is kind of wimpy, because he was a badass. He really was a badass, and he did a lot of badass things. And obviously his entire career as an ex-president is second to none. And this is just, it shows he had it from the get-go.
Yep, absolutely. My personal favorite story in the book is from the 60s chapter. It's the cyborg kitty story. Mm-hmm. As I was reading it, it felt more like farce to me than actual intelligence officers hatching what they thought was a sophisticated spy plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're onto a good snafu, is when it feels like full Wile E. Coyote. Exactly. And you're like, but it's real. And so, the story you're referring to, the CIA is always looking for some new way to weaponize something, and some new way to get intel, get secrets, commit espionage, what have you. Someone had the great idea, and I have to assume this is someone who never had a cat growing up. They had the idea to, so cats have particularly good hearing because their ears have a very peculiar shape, and they're also directional. They can sort of turn and twist their ears. Okay, so this guy learns that, and then he's like, this is me just trying to get in his head, and he's like, okay, so if we implant a microphone into a cat's ear, and then we train said cat to like run over and sit next to a bad guy or something, then surely we'll collect some valuable intel. And they went really far down this road, tragically, way too far down this road. they did surgically implant microphones into a cat's ears, and it survived. But then they tried to train it, and you can't do that. You can't. The CIA didn't know that, and they had to try it to learn that.
That wasn't on the entrance exam to
Yeah.
become a CIA operative. How to train a cat.
Yeah.
Although there's a dispute, I mean, the way you tell it as to the fate of the cat.
Yeah, there were two people involved in this, and they have kind of differing accounts, and one has a lot of anger towards the CIA, and the other doesn't, and so yeah, the cat may or may not have been hit by a car. That's an open argument.
Unclear who the most reliable narrator is there, but
exactly.
It raises a question when I read this, when I listen to your podcast, you do create the scenes, like you were just saying before, like, I'm imagining this is what the guy was thinking, right?
Right.
How much creative license versus accurate historical record do you think, what's the mix in these stories?
They're
all nonfiction, I understand.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah.
And the presentation of narrative information is as accurate as I can be. I'm not trying to put top spin on the narratives. They are what they are, but I definitely have a lot of fun with them in terms of like my own take, my own use of language to describe these things. But no, I don't want to spread disinformation. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to be Newsmax or what have you.
What do you consider yourself a historian?
I never have. No, I guess I would consider myself just a sort of fan of history with a storytelling platform.
Okay.
And yeah, so maybe that's too long of a description, but that's the other thing, though, is I think that has drawn me to history is that it is storytelling, and the great history teachers and or authors, I think, are great weavers of narrative yarns, and so yeah, that's how I made my career before doing this, is obviously in storytelling, and it's what I love.
Yeah. Could we do a couple more stories from the book?
Of course.
And then, you discuss in April of 2001, some members of the military had an in-air collision with a Chinese fighter jet in the South China Sea, and the airmen had to make an emergency landing at a Chinese airbase, destroying sensitive documents on the way down. Beyond the collision itself, of course, what went wrong here? What was the SNAFU?
Well, they had to land in China, and while they were committing espionage on China, and they had to make an emergency landing, and they were in an intelligence gathering aircraft full of the hottest technology. And so on the way down, yeah, they were trying to just obliterate the entire insides of the plane, and just tearing up this or that, hitting things with axes, because they were I can't remember exactly what you said, but just so it's clear, there wasn't a midair collision with a Chinese fighter jet who was basically trying to kind of like scare them away, and so they're going down. The fighter jet did crash. That pilot passed away, but now they have to make this emergency landing. They're trying desperately to basically just destroy the inside of this plane, and they do a pretty good job, but they land at a Chinese airbase, and they're held and for a number of days while the two governments scream at each other and try to figure it out, and thankfully they did.
Did we ever learn the price tag of everything they destroyed?
No. It was over $200.
You have a Greenland story in the book, which is very timely. Boy Scouts measuring tunnels in the ice, stored nuclear waste trapped in the ice. You think this story will get revisited if President Trump is successful in annexing Greenland?
I love this story because, first of all, yes, 100%. But this is Greenland has been a sort of linchpin of security and strategy for a very long time, and I was really kind of excited to learn this, especially in light of all these conversations. I think a lot of people, when Trump started talking about Greenland, everyone was like, "What? What are you talking about?" But as early as the 50s in the Cold War, the U.S. was looking at ways to stick nuclear missiles there to fire at the Soviet Union, and the story that's in the book is this plan called Project Iceworm, where the idea was to build a base under the ice sheet of Greenland with tunnels and train tracks that went all over the entire country so that they could just secretly and undetectably move missiles all over Greenland and launch them from anywhere they wanted. Denmark was vaguely aware of this, basically said that there was a cover story that they opened a fort there, or essentially like a military base that was mostly for research, they said, called Camp Century. And they would dig these deep holes and drop in prefab structures, and then they would dig from there, these tunnels, where they would put these sort of test train tracks out to see if this plan was feasible. Well, it turns out, and they put a nuclear reactor in there for power, which generated a lot of nuclear waste. There were, over the years that it existed, there were thousands of soldiers there. They also just dug a hole for the human waste. I'll come back to all that. But basically, they realized after a while that ice is not a stable material for construction. And all of the tunnels were caving in on themselves or shifting. I don't know if you know this, but train tracks, it's real important that they stay straight and parallel. Also real hard to do in ice. So it was an abject failure. And some indigenous people in a village nearby were getting very sick, and it was realized that this was because of nuclear waste that was getting left behind, and then they just closed up shop and left the whole thing there. It's still there. It's frozen under the ice, and like 1 million gallons of human waste is frozen under there, and that is not the worst thing that will happen when global warming heats us up, but it won't be good. It won't be pretty.
It won't. It will not be pleasant. Why'd you stop your book at the 90s or the very early aughts? We've got another quarter century of SNAFUs under our belt now. Is there a sequel in the works?
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, no. Like around the middle of the aughts, we got everything right.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We finally learned. So this was just a different time. But no, I think it does get, the final chapter is the aughts to the present.
Yeah.
So we kind of, it's like cheated on the decade structure a little bit. But one of the most recent ones is the Ever Given container ship that everyone knows when that got stuck in the canal there, or the Suez Canal. And again, just unreal. Like who, and what it exposed about how unprepared we were for something so simple to go so wrong.
Can you explain the Beanie Baby story to me? Because when I read that one, I don't quite. He has a story in the book. I don't know if anyone is of our generation here, but Beanie Babies, yes, people know them. They were like all the okay. They were all the rage in the 90s, and you have a story in here about the founder and creator of the Beanie Baby, but the SNAFU is not immediately apparent to me.
Yeah. Okay. So Ty Warner was a toy maker, designer, and he created the Beanie Baby. But what he really was, more than and the Beanie Babies are cute. Like it's a good toy. Objectively, it's a good toy. But what he really was brilliant at was kind of market and demand manipulation. So.
Almost like a fraudster. I don't know. Was that?
Well, I don't know that he would control he would control the release of Beanie Babies such that that buyers and collectors would start to panic and buy more and more, and he made sure that certain stores had had fixed inventories and controlled inventories everywhere. And he really was. I don't know that. I mean, yes, the demand was artificially.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely an artificial creation of shortage, but I don't know that it's hard to know if that particular thing was illegal or how he was, because I don't know how I don't exactly if he was framing it in an illegal way. But anyway, my good friends actually made an amazing movie about this called the Beanie Bubble. And it stars Zach Galifianakis as Ty Warner, and it's a fabulous movie. He's not a good guy, is the bottom line, and people wound up, because Beanie Babies became so valuable because of all this sort of artificial manipulation. People invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, like life savings or college savings or what have you, and then it just busted. It was the bubble burst, and people lost a ton of money, and it was very, very tragic. And Ty Warner is to this day worth tens of billions of dollars.
There you go.
So good for him.
Would President Trump's tariffs policy or Elon Musk's Doge efforts, would they count as snafus in your mind?
We'll see. Gosh, okay. So those if they are snafus, they're so unfunny that it's hard to. They don't meet that criteria to be in the book. But yes,
maybe
of course.
with time.
No, of course. Yeah, maybe in 50 years we'll be laughing at them. But yeah, they feel real tough, like serious snafus.
In all of the stories you tell in the book and all the research you did for them, was there one particular episode that left you sort of gobsmacked with surprise? Or did you just become instantly cynical and nothing the government would attempt to do or eventually screw up would really surprise you after you did all the research? Was there one where you were just like, I can't believe this?
Well, yeah, we've touched on a couple of them. There are two that come to mind for different reasons. One is an incredibly silly one, also during the Cold War. The Cold War just did not bring out the best in us. Let's be honest. There was a plan that got real far down the road to shoot a nuclear missile at the moon. Let that sink in. The thinking was, if we can detonate a nuclear warhead on the moon, the Soviets will see that, and they'll be like, oh, shit. They can do that, we're screwed. It was just a flex. Like, it was literally just to, be the schoolyard bully. Look what we can blow up. The moon. And so this was researched extensively. Carl Sagan was part of this team that researched this. He was just out of grad school. Carl likes planets, right? I thought Carl liked planets. Now he wants to blow one up. But they realized after a while that any slight miscalculation or malfunction with the rocket could very easily lead to this missile just slingshotting around the gravitational field of the moon and coming right back to Earth. And even if they hit the moon, they realized you probably wouldn't see it because it would just be like a gray cloud on the surface and it wouldn't be as impactful as they wanted. But so much time and money went into this. Thank God they didn't pull the trigger, but Yeah, that's one.
That's okay.
That one is the most Wile E. Coyote of all.
Yeah.
Because it literally has like a little dust ball at the end. No, but it's just so bonkers. The other one that comes to mind for kind of the opposite reasons, season 2 of the podcast, I think season 2 of the podcast is the least funny. It's funny. There's a lot of comedy in there, but it's also an incredibly powerful and poignant story about citizen activists in 1971 who, as you may know, Philadelphia in the late 60s and 70s was a real hotbed of activism, both for civil rights and for anti-Vietnam sentiment. And a lot of activists were feeling like the FBI was out of line and harassing people, surveilling people, and just generally sort of trouncing on people's civil liberties. They didn't have anywhere to turn. So a small group of these activists decided, we want to prove this. And the only way they could think to prove it was to stage an elaborate heist at phenomenal risk to themselves and their families, an elaborate heist where they would break into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, which they did successfully. They stole all the files. And this is at a time, this is pre-hard drive, so every field office had pretty much every file. They pour through these files. They start to find evidence of the terrible things that the FBI was doing, documented evidence. They make packets of this evidence and they start sending it to reporters and senators, all of whom very promptly sent them right back to the FBI, except for one reporter at the Washington Post, a very brave young lady named Betty Metzger, who, along with the Washington Post brass at the time, this is pre-Watergate, this is pre-Pentagon Papers, start to publish this information. And it leads to the downfall of J. Edgar Hoover, who at the time was a national hero. He had an incredibly well-curated and cultivated image as an American hero, and the American public bought it for the most part. But this is what was the beginning of his downfall. He died very shortly after that, so he wasn't alive for the church hearings, which then happened as a result of this, where COINTELPRO was exposed, and the church hearings led by a brilliant Democratic senator from Idaho, something that doesn't exist anymore, named Frank Church. This was an investigation into this whole affair, and it became, this is why we now have any congressional oversight over our intelligence institutions, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, et cetera. And it was just an incredibly heroic story. And Betty Metzger went on to write a book about it. She participated in the podcast. All of the burglars that are still alive participated in the podcast with us. We spoke to all of them. It's a very powerful and very moving story, and I'm super proud of it.
That's awesome.
That story, it is powerful because of what it to your question, that's a long way back around, but the shooting the moon with a nuclear warhead is Looney Tunes,
right?
But so is J. Edgar Hoover,
right?
Like, so is so much of what he was doing.
As you said, a different kind of Looney Tunes.
Different kind of Looney Tunes.
Yeah. Do you mind if I switch topics for a moment and talk to you a little bit about your time on The Daily Show?
Yeah, okay.
Sure. Just personal privilege here, as one newsman to another. I've been accused of working for the fake news. You actually were a purveyor of fake news. When you were doing your comedic takes on news stories and on TV news presentation, because that was a lot of it, right? What do you think you learned or discovered about the media environment in that time that you were on the show?
Oh, boy. that was an
Which is a
incredible
different time than now, right? I mean,
of course.
Yeah.
At that time, Fox News was really just kind of rising, and that's back when they still had the slogan "fair and balanced," which was so cynical because it was almost like a troll to be so aggressively partisan and then to also have that that slogan and I think that and then that was something that gave us endless fodder on the Daily Show, but John did something that at the time felt very almost like a tectonic moment in media, which was he went on the show Crossfire, which at that time was hosted by Tucker Carlson and who I can't remember.
Well, we had Paul Begala at the time. We had Tucker Carlson, James Carville, and
older guy. I can't remember.
Okay.
But he goes on that show. They're kind of not taking him too seriously, and he just says, you're the problem. And it felt a little bit like
he ended the show.
That was the eventual fallout,
yeah.
Yes. But I think he was onto something, which was that that show was this very creepy distillation of conflict news coverage, or conflict as news coverage, and just sort of like shouting and being mad at each other, that's somehow helping inform us, and it made a huge difference. The show Crossfire was canceled, and there was a sense, I think the media was kind of rattled, like, what do we do? But then weirdly, it came all the way back around. And that became, not only, at that time, Crossfire was an outlier. And then it became this thing where that conflict news model became the basic news model. It became like what everything was. And I'm not here to say that it doesn't have its place, but I do think that it doesn't feel like the lesson was learned or something.
And I know you obviously were doing comedy and a comedy show, but there were a lot of young people at that time, like, where the Daily Show was their source of actual information.
We heard that a lot.
The late, great Gwen Ifill, dear friend of mine, colleague, she used to give, whenever she would give a speech, she would always say, she would always ask people, young people at the time in an audience, like, how many of you get your news from The Daily Show? And like the whole room would like raise their hand. And she said, well, Jon Stewart gets his news from me.
Yeah.
So that was
That's great. It's a good point. And I used to tell, people would say that to me, and I would say, like, that's like buying your groceries at a candy store. Like, come on, do better. But yeah, it's, I think for young people especially, like, that was an accessible.
Did you consider, did you feel a responsibility to that in any way as you were doing your comedy? Like, no.
No, I think we felt like court jesters, just sort of lobbing firecrackers into the news space. But that's not to say we didn't maybe have some responsibility. I don't know, but I certainly didn't own any.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
Some of our audience members submitted questions, which we're going to get to in a moment. But sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, comedy was our god.
Yes.
In that time.
Couple last questions from me before I read you these audience questions that were submitted, which are also quite good. You did some surrogate work last year for the Harris Walls campaign. Do you intend to stay active in politics?
That was an interesting case because I just posted a couple of things, and then the campaign reached out, and it just felt like an important moment that I was proud to participate in. It's a case-by-case thing. I do still work. I'm on the board of an organization called Represent Us, which is a nonpartisan organization that's just does a lot of anti-corruption work. In particular, it advocates for ranked choice voting. It advocates for the elimination of dark money, anti-gerrymandering, just the kind of the things that seem so obvious. Like, why aren't we doing better? But that needs people to fight for it.
Would you ever run for office yourself?
Don't think so.
Don't think so. Do you have a favorite yet in the potential 2028 Democratic field?
Oh, wow. You know what? I'm going to throw my head in the ring.
You are.
Yeah.
that was a quick reversal.
Yeah. Well, you made me think about it, and I realized, like, it's got to be me. I mean, it's got to.
No? Nobody is exciting you that's out there right now?
Yeah. What is that great line that Pete Buttigieg said? I'm not a fisherman, but I know bait when I see it. No, but I like Pete. I think he's cool. I wouldn't say like he's the guy. It really depends on what the moment calls for, and we're a long way away from that moment.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people like Pete that are doing great.
I'm marking you down as a Pete supporter.
All right. I mean, I really hope Joe runs again, but we'll see.
We'll turn to some of these audience questions now that have been submitted in advance. I don't know if everyone is actually here in attendance, but Mary Beth has a question that goes back to your first season of your podcast. After you learned about Able Archer 83, did it make you rethink how national and international events influenced your childhood and formative years?
Able Archer 83 is the subject of season 1 of the SNAFU podcast. It's an incredible story, which I will try to tell you in 2 sentences. They'll be run-on sentences. But, but basically, who remembers the movie War Games? Okay, a smattering. But it's in the 80s, in 1983, there was NATO would do this military exercise every year called Able Archer, and they would mobilize masses of troops and navies and all these things to essentially rehearse for a nuclear war. And this was all above board. The Soviets knew about it, and it wasn't like it happened every year. But this particular year, because Cold War tensions were so high for a number of reasons, and the Soviets saw Able Archer as possibly cover for the staging of an actual invasion or the launching of a nuclear attack. And so they ramped up their nuclear posture. We clocked that, ramped up our nuclear posture, and no one knew about this. This was completely under the public radar. A lot of historians now think it's the closest we came to an actual nuclear holocaust. It's a terrifying story, but it's so hilarious because the stakes were human existence. And that's just like, you have to laugh. But what's cool, I'm really proud of that season, in part because towards the end we start to really deconstruct to the question. I'm getting back to the question, like what was going on at the time, what we knew in pop culture, and versus what George Shultz and Reagan and others knew at the time. And when you start to plot the events of Able Archer up against a timeline of pop culture, you do start to see some very strange moments of, oh, wow, that Reagan's speech about maybe we can get along better with the Russians was right after some pivotal moments of Able Archer, where this nuclear scare was known only to him and others. So yes, and then of course the movie War Games, which is almost this exact story, came out in 1983.
Yeah. One of my favorite movies.
It's a fabulous movie.
Yeah.
And I rewatched it while we were making the podcast, and I called up Matthew Broderick, who starred in the movie, and I interviewed him, and I was excited to sort of ask him if he knew about this. This is what your movie kind of is, and he had no idea. No one had ever told him. And it's and partly that's because no one knew about it. None of this was publicly known until just a few years ago. It was all classified. And one brave historian basically just relentlessly attacked the State Department with FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, and he's the one who dug it up, and it's a really fun season of the show.
The question, did it make you rethink how national and international events influenced your childhood?
Yes, indirectly. I don't think I walked away from the podcast thinking here are 5 ways that that international events shaped my childhood. But I do remember being at summer camp one summer. I talk about this in the podcast actually, and having a kind of nuclear war existential crisis as a 10-year-old, and a counselor having to talk me down. Some 13-year-old kid had to be it's gonna be okay, Ed. We're not gonna. Do you want to go canoeing and maybe we'll have some s'mores and kind of figure it out. It's going to be all right.
I had a similar experience doing current events in the 4th grade. And going and I started doing my presentation of a current event of the Cold War situation. I lost it. I was freaked out. I was it was,
wow.
Yeah.
Yes, I think all of us in a certain age range were profoundly impacted. Pop culture was so impacted. There were movies, songs, nuclear tension was just part of the fabric of our society.
Pop culture is a good segue to Jeremy's question. In all the SNAFUs you researched, was there a particular story you think would make an amazing TV series or movie? And if so, would you want to be part of it?
Almost all of them would be amazing. I'm excited to, I have a production company in LA, and we're working on the Able Archer story right now, and the Able Archer story is very Veep, right? It's Cold War chaos. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Armando Iannucci. He's the one who created Veep, and lots of other very sharp.
Didn't he do a
satire.
whole Iraq War send-up before, from the Brits?
Yes.
Yeah.
I forget. That was a British TV series. He's British. And I forget the name of it,
I do too.
But it's
really sharp.
Yeah, it's just he's so good at pointing out and this is essentially what Veep is, just pointing out how we think that our institutions are run by smart people or by people that are better equipped or have the emotional intelligence to do these things, and they're just people. They're just so human, they're so flawed, and there's something charming. That's why Veep was so charming, in spite of also being kind of horrifying. Anyway, that's to me what is great about the Able Archer story.
Will Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy have cameos in the Able Archer?
Oh, hell yes.
Story?
We have to.
Yeah, okay.
But I really hope we can get The Burglary, which was Betty Metzger's book. I really hope we can turn that into a powerful series or movie. It's an incredible story.
Catherine asks, your work has always had a strong cultural relevance and lens. I think Hollywood is losing cultural relevance, especially with younger men and working people. How do you think Hollywood can break through to these audiences? What roles do humor and satire play?
I would agree that pop culture and show business are kind of losing a bit of punch but I'm not sure it's because of the content itself. You can still find great content. Veep was incredible social and political satire. It just was incredible. The Daily Show is still delivering top-notch political and journalism satire. John Oliver's doing the same, and so you can find great stuff. The problem is not necessarily that it's not there; it's that the information silos that we're all in might not contain all of that stuff. It used to be that we shared so much of pop culture, and now I don't feel like I know half what's going on. Somebody at work is like, oh man, I'm so into this show with these 5 amazing movie stars, and I'm like, I don't know any of those people. And I've never heard of the show. And they're like, really? Because it's the biggest show right now. I've never heard of it. It just feels like we're so fractured in terms of our pop culture consumption.
And we're getting old.
That's what I'm saying. That you just said everything that I said in 2 words. Getting old. Yes.
Jeremy asks, in research.
Wait a minute. Jeremy's already asked a question.
Oh wait, sorry. There are 2 Jeremys.
Oh my. Okay. 2. All right.
I don't know if it's the same Jeremy though. So, in researching history's greatest snafus, did you find any patterns in how leaders justified their bad decisions at the time? Are there warning signs we could recognize today?
Oh. I would say that the bigger pattern is not how leaders justify their bad behavior. It's just how with almost 100% of the time they get away with it. And that is like the most astounding pattern. So much of the stuff in this book where you're like, that guy should go to jail. That guy should lose his job. Like, that's it. Like, just get him out of that job. Doesn't happen.
Maybe at the leadership level, there's also a bunch of buffoonery in the book.
Yeah.
In fact, you make a Dwight Schrute reference.
A couple, yeah.
A couple of them in the book. But I do feel like there are a lot of Dwights in this book.
Yeah. There's a lot of Dwights in the world. Yeah. Sorry.
Dwight had a lot of snafus on the show, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, back to the to season 3 of the podcast about Prohibition, and it is an incredible story. It was uncovered by the New York City medical examiner's office as they started to sort of analyze all of these corpses coming in, and that's a cool story in its own right because they were pioneering all of these techniques in forensic toxicology and how to figure out what chemicals are in human tissue and so forth. But they're the ones who exposed this poisoning process that the government was engaged in. And it was all made public, 100% at the time. And there was no accountability at all. Like, people shuffled around, got different jobs, and it's so breathtaking.
So wild.
Like, you would think if you were involved in a government scandal that you wouldn't become UN ambassador. I don't know.
Were you saving that all this entire hour?
I don't know.
You were saving your Mike Walsh joke for the end of the year?
Well, it was so funny because I got to see it in today to do these other interviews with your colleagues, and all of the staff were like, "We're so sorry. It's crazy. It's breaking news today. Everything's nuts." And that's what was on TV. That's all anyone was talking about. It was nice and crazy.
Our last audience question comes from Alvin. Can you tell us about a snafu you will be reporting on in the future?
That I'll be reporting on in
Yes.
the future? Well, first of all, Alvin is a wonderful name. It's my father's middle name, and it is underutilized in society, and I commend you for having such... Way to go, Alvin. It's a great question. I think that a lot of what's going on right now will make its way into the SNAFU universe before too long. But I do think we need a little bit of space. But I will. This is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the next phase of the SNAFU podcast. I guess I can tell you a couple of specific things that we'll be covering, but I'm changing the format a little bit. So each season is a very deep dive into one particular story. I know I said at the beginning of this session that I didn't want to do just another interview show, but I've started feeling like, wouldn't it be fun to have some people on the podcast? Wouldn't it be fun to bring some of my my amazing comedy friends, or just people throughout culture that have interesting things to say? Your David Chalians, if you will.
Oh yeah, thanks.
And so the format will be for season 4. I'll be doing a lot more episodes, and each one will be one snafu that I essentially will tell a guest. And I'll pick a snafu that maybe, David, if you come on, I'll pick something that you might actually have some, it's a presidential snafu, Teapot Dome or something.
Right.
And also, we're being less picky on this one. This one's one where we want to actually dip a little bit more into the popular memories. So things like the Lusitania, or the, we did kind of a test pilot, and I did the Ernest Shackleton story. Do you know this? The Endurance. Ernest Shackleton was a polar explorer in the early 1900s, and took all of this large crew of people on a mission to be the first to cross the continent of Antarctica. Someone had already reached the South Pole. He was like, I'm going to cross it. And he's on this big wooden ship, the Endurance. They get stuck in the ice. Of course you're going to get stuck in the ice. You go to Antarctica. But they're stuck there for a year. And it's this incredible story of heroism. They had to, the ship suddenly, they're able to stay on the ship for a long time, but then it gets crushed and it sinks, and they have to live in tents on the ice, and then they have to hike to another place, so they're hauling their lifeboats with them. Eventually one group takes the lifeboats to another island to search for help, but that island's uninhabited, so they have to go to another island and then hike over a mountain range to get to a whaling outpost, and that guy goes to Argentina and gets help, and they finally have a boat that goes back to Antarctica and gets the guys, and everyone survived. It's the most incredible, and the name of the boat was the Endurance. Amazingly, this ship, the Endurance, this story is so cool. Sorry. The navigator kept very detailed logs of the movements of the heavens. Modern archaeologists were able to, or marine archaeologists were able to reverse calculate from those logs the exact position of the Endurance when it was stuck in the ice.
Wow.
They went there and started to look at the bottom of the ocean, and they fucking found the Endurance.
Basically.
It turns out the water is so cold there that all the enzymes that consume wood and make things decompose in the ocean, they don't live there. So the Endurance is perfectly preserved at the bottom of the Antarctic Ocean, and there's incredible photos of it. It's a wild and fascinating story. I told that story to my dear old friend Nick Kroll, and we had a ton of fun with it, and it was a sort of test case to see if this format works. And I'm excited to say that it does.
Good.
So you'll be hearing about the Endurance. You'll be hearing about lots of other cool things.
That's awesome. Ed Helms, everyone. Book of SNAFU. I know you're
I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Okay.
I do just want to make first of all, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. This has been incredibly fun. And I just cannot thank you enough, David Chalian, for doing this with me and being such a fun partner in this endeavor. So thank you, David Chalian.
And you're going to stick around and sign some books.
I'm signing books.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
All right, thank you so much to Ed Helms and David Chalian, and thank you all for joining us. The giveaway winner is Andrew Hall.